Conflicts arising during Neolithic. A so-called war, roughly 5,000 years ago in S.J.A.P.L in Spain, are in fact out of Americans arriving from the Americas, with the intention to turn over all or significant parts of Western Europe and Western Eurasia, which in fact they succeed in. In the video we react to, the wars refer to parts of Spain, specifically to wars in the Spanish Levantine in the east. Levantine simply means east. The Levant, which is a subregion of West Asia, and that also includes Israel. It further also includes modern-day Syria, Lebanon, Jordan, Israel, Palestine, and the southern part of Turkey, as well as Cyprus. The name possibly refers to the east or to east of the Mediterranean. If this were to be true, this obviously would be so from the viewpoint of groups that cross the Mediterranean to reach the Levant and or the Fertile Crescent. The term Levant seems to mean rising in French, referring to the area where the sun rises in the east, from the perspective of the Western Mediterranean. Ancient DNA proves that Americans arrived in Spain 5,000 years ago. Ancient DNA, especially together with all ancestral markers, prove us all along that out of Americans roughly 5,000 years ago were arriving through the North Atlantic gyre and currents. These out of Americans roughly 5,000 years ago already were carrying Y-DNA haplogroup R1BM269, which will end up turning over Western Eurasia, this starting out amongst others with Atlantic facades, and exactly their Y-DNA haplogroup R1BM269 will later dominate all modern Western Europeans and Western Eurasians. The groups R1BM269, R1b and R1a, all three are R1 descendants of the American root R1. And together these three groups today represent a whopping 60% of all modern Western Europeans and Western Eurasians, probably already from roughly 5,000 years ago on. The ancestors of the today Basques, which were experienced transatlantic seafarers and whale hunters, as well as some few other isolated groups, exceptionally will not be turned over, or at least part of these ancestors can withdraw and persist, this more or less in Basque country, and also retain the so-called native European DNA, while it in were our earlier out of Americans, at least partly linked to, or descending from the Aurignacian culture. Carrying Y-DNA C and R1b, this still without the M269 mutation, already culturally present in parts of Europe, this 47,000 to 41,000 years ago, covering also the strategical region in Spain in question, and as said retained the so-called hunter-gatherer DNA, and also remained rhesus negative. Basques Y-DNA R1b up to 70 to 85%. Basques exhibit Y-DNA haplogroup R1b, particularly R1b-DF27, at very high frequencies, with some estimates reaching up to 70 to 85%. This strong association with R1b links the Basque paternal lineage to a major European population expansion, that we claim to have happened from 8,000 until 4,500 years ago, this based on ancient DNA findings. David Rye, 2021. According to consensus, this population extension occurred during the Bronze Age. The Bronze Age was a historical period defined by the widespread use of bronze, which is an alloy of copper and tin, for tools, weapons, and art, following the Stone Age and preceding the Iron Age. This era, which began at different times in different regions, and roughly 3300 to 1200 BCE in the Middle East, saw major advancements like urbanization, writing systems, and extensive trade networks. While R1b is often associated with Indo-European peoples, Basques speak a non-Indo-European language, highlighting the complex genetic history of the region, where a significant influx of A1b males occurred around 4,000 years ago, replacing the older Paleolithic, Neolithic Y chromosome lineages. War, 5,000 years ago in S.J.A.P.L in Spain. You can more or less detect by the headdresses of some. Similar to some of the roughly 1,000 to 2,000 years later Sea Peoples, that the ones that died could have been Native Americans, possibly ambushed by the experienced Basques, and who are at least partly similar and related to the Pelasgians. Basques have one of the highest concentrations of rhesus negative or Rh negative blood in the world. This unique genetic trait, along with a high prevalence of type O blood, like Native Americans, supports the Basques' distinctiveness as a European population with a long history of relative isolation in the Pyrenees Mountains, and that they had been capable to hold off the population turnover events dominantly between 8,000 and 4,500 years ago. The Atlas Mountain Berbers also show elevated Rh-negative frequencies. We also claim that the Atlas Mountain Berbers also were out of Americans that had arrived the same way as the ancestors of the Basques had arrived. It is clear that both places are amongst the most exposed to the North Atlantic gyre and currents, in fact in the whole world. Ancient DNA, especially together with all ancestral markers, prove us all along that out of Americans roughly 5,000 years ago were arriving through the North Atlantic gyre and currents. Berbers and out of the Americas. Berbers in general, and specifically the Atlas Mountain Berbers, and Morocco, are subject of other videos in relation to Guanche people, mummies, Spain, Canary Islands, Cabo Verde, Azores, Rikhat in Mauritania, Africa, Atlantis, the Green Sahara, as well as Egyptian cultures, the Nile, pyramids, as well as the Late Bronze Age collapse and the role of sea peoples, as well as the relation of all with Atlantic gyres and currents, and out of the Americas. Berbers in general, and specifically the Atlas Mountain Berbers, also were out of Americans that had arrived the same way as the ancestors of the Basques had arrived. You can find more on the subject and related to the subject in our channel, or search in YouTube for EMH, Aurignacian Culture versus Out of Africa, the essential role of Neanderthals, human history. Roc de les Aurignacs, high up in the Pyrenees. At 9:57 in his video, Stefan Milo remarks that before the Neolithic or before 5,000 years ago, there were only very few conflicts, and that around 5,000 years ago the number of conflicts significantly increased. Stefan Milo wonders if it has to do with agriculture, or things related to agriculture, like all kinds of raidings. What calls attention in the case Stefan Milo analyses, which was in Roc de les Aurignacs, high up in the Pyrenees, is that in a cave buried or occasionally thrown deaths, had survived and healed older injuries and also presented signs of prolonged food shortages. Roc de les Aurignacs is an important early Bronze Age communal burial site in the Pyrenees Mountains of Catalonia, Spain, dating to approximately 4,100 to 4,500 years ago. Excavations led by Carlos Tornero have uncovered over 1,000 human bones from at least 51 individuals, providing evidence of high-altitude living, social interactions, and significant interpersonal violence, including a famous case of an arrowhead still embedded in a rib. Maybe they got isolated for a very prolonged period of time, by the invaders, or more specifically the actors in the population turnover events. This for us makes most sense because the ancestors of the Basques had the redrawn from the freshly invading well-prepared and fed out of Americans, which most probably were huge compared to the so-called natives, the ancestors of the Basques. Please comment with your doubts and remarks, as we pretend to complete or to remake this same video, for it to become more useful and or understandable for you and others. We do not pretend to feature popular, nor widely accepted videos, but rather to rewrite parts, especially of human history, that are scientifically proven to be improbable at this point. Also ask for more or better illustrations and or proofs, if this would be helpful. Please remember that you should not call yourself an alternative historian or historian, if you do not clarify at least some part of history, or do not add up with a fully scientifically supported history, or with a history without too many paradigms. Like consensus still fails to do so, and most historians, even alternative historians, also fail to do so until now. Criticizing or doubting the historical vision or timelines of others, independent if this is consensus or mainstream or none of both, is not exactly being a historian, or at least not a historian that adds up to history. Thank you.